Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ninth and final webinar of the 2020-2021 Heritage Orchard Conference webinar series. Today we have Adam Nuber from the Felix Gillet Institute in North Central California. And he's going to be talking about perennial fruit plants of the Northern Sierra Gold Rush era and the work that Felix Gillet has done in California. But before we get into that, being the final webinar of the series, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of information about everyone that's been signing up for us here. Our first webinar, or our first conference, was actually an in-person conference held in May of 2019 in Sandpoint, Idaho. At that time, we were able to attract around 75 people from around the Pacific Northwest mostly. We had some presenters from Oregon and Wyoming and Montana, and we were happy with the turnout that we had for that in-person event. But since with COVID and everything, and we decided to turn this into a webinar series, it has really opened it up to a lot of people, and that's really what our goal was for this. But I just wanted to let you guys know that we ended up having over 1,200 people sign up for this webinar series, which it's far exceeded all of our expectations when we started this conference. Of the over 1,200 participants, we have people from 49 of our states here in the United States. The only state we missed out was on Delaware. So if you have anybody from Delaware that's interested in apples, make sure to loop them into what we're doing so we can get all 50 states at some point. And something that really surprised me was we ended up having participants from over 20 countries. And I wanted to share this map real quick. I was just absolutely blown away to have people from all over the world tuning in for this event. We had people from New Zealand and Australia, up through the Philippines, Bangladesh, Pakistan, a ton of countries over in Europe, and then we had quite a few in Mexico and Canada as well. So it's just really neat to see the far reach that this conference has had, and it's really been interesting to get all the reactions from everybody. A lot of people appreciative of what we're doing and what we're trying to put together here. So we're really excited, and the planning committee is going to be getting together next month. So we're going to start talking about our next steps for the conference. So I'm sure all of you guys will get looped in. I also wanted to mention that we have a survey about the conference. We'll send that out one more time after this final webinar is done, and we would really appreciate anybody that has time to fill that out. That'll just help us develop the next steps and where we go with this conference from there. All right, without further ado, we're going to get on to Adam's presentation here. Anybody that has any questions, please use the Q&A app at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for Adam, and we'll stop midway through the presentation and then again at the end to cover some questions. So let's go ahead and take it away, Adam.
Can you see that? Can you see that? Does that work good? Can you hear that? Can you?
Oh, there we go. Perfect. You're up and running.
I can't hear you.
Oh, how about now?
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
You're all set.
No? Okay. Sorry, my computer was skipping. How about now?
Yeah, no, that's perfect right there.
All right, great. So my name is Adam Nuber, and I am the nursery manager for we've been doing this for about 12 years, where we're going out and we're finding all these fruit trees left over from the gold rush. So our main mission is dedicated to the appreciation, preservation, and propagation of heirloom edible and ornamental perennials from the Sierra. And so it's kind of a two-pronged institute, where one is we are documenting a lot of the agricultural legacy of Felix Gillet, and he was a gold rush horticulturalist in Nevada City, in our hometown here. And so the other is, as we're exploring this gold rush area where people came from all over the world, planting fruit trees and importing fruit trees from nurseries all over, there's still a living library of plants that are still out here. And they're still alive and doing well. And so we feel it's really important, like a lot of people here, to go back and document and save a lot of these lost varieties or rare varieties or unappreciated varieties. And this is Felix Gillet himself. He started Barren Hill Nursery in 1869. And this was one of his original catalogs. And I have to mention Amigo Bob Contisano, our founder, organic agricultural advocate, grandfather of organic agriculture in California. He had so much influence in the agricultural community. It just spanned an impressive career. He was supposed to be speaking here, but he had passed away at the end of last year. So really, this is in honor of Amigo Bob and everything he's done and how many people he's inspired over the years, including me. He was a good friend and a mentor. Yeah, and we love and miss him so much. So I will be taking you on this little journey through Gold Country. About Amigo, though, he did find this. He started the Peaceful Valley Farm Supply. He helped start the Eco Farm Conference. He was instrumental in OMRI listing of organic materials. He was instrumental in creation of the CCOF. You can look up his impressive resume on Google. And so I'm gonna start this journey where Amigo started this journey. He really loved to tell this story of when he was out here in Nevada City, and he started the Peaceful Valley Farm Supply back in the 70s. People would tell him about this man, Felix Gillet. And he would ride around and look for trees. He would document trees. He would eat as much fruit as he can. And he really felt a yearning to save and preserve a lot of these varieties. And so one day he was out on these back roads and he came upon Buck's Ranch. And it was an old ranch in 68 right next to a mining site. And it had over 100 large standard apple trees, pear trees, there's rhubarb, there's all kinds of old plants out there. And it really inspired him to figure out what the story is with this, because he knew it ran a lot deeper. And so he really went on this journey preserving and discovering a lot of these lost stuff. And that started back when he was running Peaceful Valley out here. And so this is Buck's Ranch right here. This is, as you can see, there's a lot of healthy trees still producing a lot of fruit. The bears seem to get most of it, and they know which trees are the best for sure. But it's a very inspiring orchard where we found amazing fruit varieties. This is with a giant rhubarb leaf, of course. Yeah, we love going out here in the middle of nowhere. What's really interesting is that a lot of the miners came out, a lot of people came out to find gold, but the people who made the money were the people supplying the miners with food and lodging and everything they needed and wanted. And this is the farmhouse out there. We believe this is a Calville Rouge apple. Here's a beautiful wine sap apple. The owner is a great steward of the property. and lets us come out. Full apple, it's a late season, it's a great storage apple, crisp, sweet, tart, white, everything you want in a delicious late season storage apple. And this is another apple we found out at Bucks Ranch. We believe it might be a Wiccan, but they're all small lunchbox size, and they have that beautiful coloring palette, and they have that amazing russet coming out of the cavity. Yeah, another tree out there. And you can just see how abundant they are. You know, and we believe this is a 20-ounce pippin from Bucks Ranch. And so these were a lot of the original fruit that had inspired Amigo. And so he had founded the Felix Joy Institute. And so me, Jennifer, and Amigo are some of the main people here that have built the organization and the website and our documentation. But there's a lot of people that contribute, and a lot of the community contributes. We get a lot of emails. Our office manager, Joy, we couldn't really do it without her. And this is the kind of biodiversity that we're just seeing out here on some of our excursions. And so diversity, you can see just going out how much food we can glean for nothing. We don't have to pay for this food. Mother Nature supplies it for us. And not only that, all of this is our biological horticultural legacy that has been passed down from all of our ancestors. A lot of this fruit has gone for thousands of years, being developed, chosen, picked, and carried on throughout the whole world. Every culture has really contributed to our food supply. And it would be a travesty if we lost as much as we have so far. So in about the early 1900s, changed our society. And in that, our biodiversity really bottlenecked. About 95%, they say, of the fruit that we had in 1900 has been disappeared. Even peas or carrots, just our food supply, 95% has either been disappeared or not really available. But as you can see, a lot of this old stuff is still out there. And, you know, all of us in our communities, we can go out there and find these on our own time and bring them back and have our own little projects. And our stories and our ancestors, everything started moving really quickly. A lot of the people who were holding these seeds and these fruit were farmers, people who lived off the land. And as soon as factory jobs came in, people were lured out and they left, and they abandoned a lot of this horticultural legacy that we were all holding on to for thousands of years. And then large seed companies and nurseries started buying out a lot of other companies. And then they had to shed varieties that no longer worked for them. And so preserving this and kind of cultivating a relationship with food and Mother Earth and our history, and learning lessons that way, it's all part of what we're doing and what we think is important. And in order to do that, we have to travel to really beautiful areas in Gold Country and eat a lot of food and fruit and document a lot of trees and meet amazing people on our way. And so we'll find an old tree, we'll eat the fruit, we'll cut the scions. Sometimes we get a little bit of help. It's my daughter out in the snow. And then we'll collect tons of scion over the season. And I love looking at the scion. I love looking at the colors of the scions. It's so beautiful. And then also I realized that scions are sometimes indicative of what color the fruit might be. We'll have cool grafting parties, we'll try to propagate at least 150 varieties a year but we have about 260 varieties that we think are worth saving. A lot of times I got to graft solo. I'll graft about 1,000 trees just on this table here. And then this is a rather unkempt bucket, but this is kind of what they look like after we graft and bundle them. And then we plant them out in the field. And this is where the magic happens. Every year, I feel like, how is this gonna work? It's like magic that grafting even works, that they come together and seal and produce a new tree. I believe this is probably a kefir pear. And they get a little bigger, it gets a little weedy. And then you get smart and you put weed cloth down. And they get a little bigger. And at this point, they're really stable and they just start charging. And then by the end of the year, you have full-sized apple trees or plum trees or whatever we're growing. And we also are an educational nonprofit. So we really like to educate the public and bring people out and get hands-on and eat the food and find out how important it is. And this is Dan Krebin, and he is actually he's been my main fruit tree guide, learning nursery work and fruit trees and grafting. Dan Krebin actually was Amigo's largest buyer of his trees. He was one of the first organic fruit tree nurseries about 40 years ago. And so Amigo could not find any organic fruit trees except for from Dan. And so he would buy as many trees from Dan as possible. And I still know where there's some Dan trees out here that he had sold. But he's been a great teacher, and he helped found the nursery. It wouldn't have gotten started as quickly if it wasn't for him. Having fruit tastings always is a highlight in figuring out what people like and the subtlety of flavor and aroma, and different people's relationship and perspective on fruit. It's very fun, informative, beautiful cherries. The birds get most of them, and we try to do as much fruit identification as possible. This is Jen Bliss. She's our president, and she does most of the ID work. She's much better at it than I am, but I do love it. And then we'll even ship trees across the country. It's very fun. And then we also have like a kit. So people can try to do this themselves in their own community. So we like to teach people and give people kits and just ideas and inform them on how they can do this themselves. Because that's really what we need to do. We need more community. We need to involve ourselves with each other more. And so here's just a few of these things. We use FileMaker to document and GPS a lot of these. So this is actually what you had seen earlier. And this is the apple that comes off there. We don't know exactly what that is. We just call it Old Schoolhouse because it's at an old schoolhouse. But it's, I don't know, it's kind of like a Sierra Beauty, similar. Plant locations. And then we also like to do orchard surveys for state parks or other people where we can GPS and map and try to identify what they have. This is a recent survey we had done. We think this might be the Lamb Abbey apple. Either way, it is one of the most delicious apples I've had. And so that's a little bit about our organization and where we're coming from, and what we're actively trying to do right now. But it's really based on this man, Felix Gillette. And he is a very influential horticulturalist that maybe you've never heard his impressive contribution to agriculture in our country. This is him in his greenhouse. And underneath these tumblers here are walnut trees. And walnuts were one of his major contributions to the United States and the Pacific Northwest. This is a plaque on his house. He's been honored by the city of Nevada City. And this is the original house. It's still standing. It's a residential, grow vegetables, and he's helped out a lot with Felix Gillette over the years. And this pear tree right here actually is a Beret Clergot, a French pear. that he planted right off of his front porch. And there it is. It's a very beautiful pear. And I have a quick story about that too. We kept eating this pear and it tasted terrible. It was one of the worst pears I've had. And we couldn't figure out why he planted it, and his descriptions say how delicious it was. But it wasn't until I read, I believe, an old Pacific Rural Press magazine that someone had described their experience as being really bad with this pear. And then back in the day, newspapers were more of a communication tool where there was a call and response each year. So people, each month, so people would write back. And then a gentleman said, that's how I felt about the Beret Clerico bear, until I found out how to ripen it. And so he gave an explanation of ripening it in a box of comforts in a cool area. And so we did that, and it came out super sweet and melty and juicy. And it just really shows how complex pears are. There's a picking date and a ripening date, and our relationship with that food is gone. We just go to a store and we pick up one of 6 kinds of fruit available all year round. It's more, and so this is his original porch where he was standing in that blue photo. This porch was actually his greenhouse. So it's pretty amazing having access to his house. And then I just kind of wanted to show you what a little journey, that maybe Amigo would take us on. And this is some of our trip through the gold rush on, out Highway 49. But this is one of our favorite old homesteads to go to. This is Cy Rollins. He's an old gentleman who works like a goat, but he really maintains all of these big, beautiful heirloom trees. As you can see, we think this is a Renette Franc, but you can see that its trunk is almost as wide as this car. It actually has access to water underground, which gives it a lot of life. And this is his donkey, Sourdough. He always greets us when we go out there. And this is him taking care of his Rhode Island greening apple. Produces amazingly every single year at somewhere around 4,000 feet. That's the apple from that tree. This is another apple from that same homestead. So we think it may be the ribston. But as you can see, what I also love about this apple is how distinct each apple is. This came from the same tree, maybe from the same branch. And they will be different sizes, shapes, colors. There are similar characteristics once you start looking, but I find that some of the heirlooms, they don't have that consistency that that our general public is looking for, or it's not easy to gather, or it bruises easily. There's a lot of factors that eliminate a lot of these foods from our diets just because they don't ship well. And everyone should have these kind of trees in their backyard. And this is another quince pear, a quince on that same property. As you can tell, these trunks have been growing for a very long time. And some old Italian grape, seedless Italian grape, he calls it. And this is kind of like what is out there in the gold country. This looks like a mess of a forest, but if you look closer, there's over a dozen standard apples just getting swallowed up by the forest and the blackberries now. And this is a 1/4 acre of hops just in the middle of the forest there. And so that's kind of something that the trips that we take on. And now I kind of want to take you on a fruit journey. And we're going to go through all of these fruits and go through what Felix himself had contributed to our agricultural system, and then also the fruits that we find still out there that really should be saved. So Felix Gillet is credited with importing the original walnut varieties that became the standard in California. He came from France, which had a very Mediterranean climate, very similar to California. And so when he came here, there's a lot of food that he knew would grow here and that didn't grow here. And so he was kind of a madman where he imported from all over the world, all throughout Europe, and put all of his savings into getting these plants across the ocean. And to the Mayette and the Franquette and the Melon, all of these became the standard that California grew. And then even the progeny of those that are still grown today. So it was actually the mother material from which most breeding projects came from. This is his handwritten list of some of the walnuts he had. We were fortunate that in the house of Felix Gillet, there is still lots of original documentation left over. So we were fortunate enough to be able to go in there and scan them and preserve a lot of this, what was left in his basement. And so this is a handwritten list, and these are some walnuts we've collected. This Chaubert here is what we think is one of the most delicious walnuts. It's buttery, it doesn't have that astringency that you would get on some walnuts. It's a lot about walnuts. He is the walnut man in Lake County. He's been doing it his whole life. Very incredible man. And he showed us a lot of amazing walnuts out in Lake County, including this Franquette with an enormous black walnut rootstock. This is the Chaubert I was telling you about. It's just still growing out there. It's just produces every year. Delicious blonde walnuts. And this is another one we found. I don't know how old this one is, but it is enormous and delicious, also non-astringent. You can see how wide and how long they are. This is Seth again looking at a chestnut tree. Is that chestnut? No, that's another walnut. And then this walnut has giant leaves. We just called it mega leaf because it was so beautiful and giant leaves. Amigo must have pulled this out of the historical records in our town, but this is an old photograph of a walnut sprout. So I don't know who else would have done it. And this is one of his catalogs for walnuts. And this is the elusive cluster walnut. We looked for years for a walnut that clustered like this. But Alex Suchan did know where one was. And so we were able to make graphs of that and keep that going. Besides walnuts, chestnuts was another one of his important importations and breeding projects. In fact, the main chestnut that is grown today is the Colossal, which is a breeding project of Felix Gillet, and the tree still grows in Nevada City. We call it the Marron de Leon or the Donna de Leon, and it's an enormous, delicious, prolific chestnut. Those are the chestnuts that we picked off the ground there. The Marron Quercy is something that he had, and we found a few of those. And this is the original colossal chestnut. It's still growing. There's still a lot of chestnuts out there. Felix Gillet knew that these nut trees, these chestnuts and walnuts would do so well. And he was smart too, because I really can't think of more trees where you have to do as little work and you get as much food as you do, because how drought tolerant they are and how large they get and how many nuts they produce. It's very smart. We still find some American chestnuts out here. The East Coast was covered in chestnuts, like the redwoods of the West Coast. They all had succumbed to fire blight. Fortunately, the American chestnut out here does well because we don't have a lot of humidity. It gets very dry, and so that blight cannot grow. A couple more American chestnuts. And then picking them up, though, is kind of a lot of work. You got to stomp on those spines. And so another plant that Felix was instrumental in introducing was the hazelnut. Although they don't do well where we are, it's the entire Oregon hazelnut industry. He imported the Barcelona and its pollinator, the Duchili, and that became the entire hazelnut industry. And it wasn't until recently that a lot of those started getting a blight. And this is Sean Mellenbacher, who's a top hazelnut breeder in Oregon University. And I don't have the handwritten hazelnut document because they got it and it's framed at the university showing how Felix Gillet started the whole industry and was their original, and now it's one of their largest imports. And Sean being for the blight resistance. And he's had a lot of success there. And so now a lot of his varieties are actually overtaking that Barcelona and Duchili combo. And these are just some of the hazelnuts that he did have. In fact, this is an original photo that he had taken, or someone had taken, maybe Charles Parsons, who had taken over after him, of a red-leafed Abilene hazelnut. And this is actually still growing in his front yard right there. And we just started getting it going. This, we believe, is probably a Barcelona. And these hazelnuts are still scattered all over this area. It's amazing how much fruit really is out here still. Some more Barcelonas. And this is that purple-leaved Abilene. This is still growing there. Another important contribution Felix had was helping start the plum industry. He had imported some of the most important dessert plums from France. The Claric Mammoth, the Robes des Sergeant, the French Improved. All of these became the standard for a very booming dessert plum industry in California. A horticulturalist around that time who also imported these same varieties, but he was just a couple years later than him as far as the prunes. And these are just some of the plum varieties he had. The Beauvais, which we think we found as a very beautiful plum, is coming up. And this is another prune plum that we found that the bears eat every year, except for a couple of years ago, it really did some damage on it. And Amigo has been coming up to Malakoff Diggins Park for over 40 years, and he really loved this park and he really loved the trees. But you can see here, we're all lamenting over the destruction of this Robes des Sergeant prune plum. And this is Malakoff Diggins, which is historical in a few different ways, but this is all man-made. These are like man-made Grand Canyons that during the gold rush, they used hydraulic mining, which was a giant water gun that sprayed mountains down and created these canyons. And then all of this silt was drained out of the rivers, and all the gold in there was collected. But it wasn't, they had a nice run, but then there was there was a decision, the Sawyer decision, that was actually California's first environmental law. They said they can't do this anymore. And it totally put a stop to all of this. A lot of that silt was going down into Marysville, flooding out farms, and eventually killed people. And so they had to put a stop to this because it was affecting so much downriver, a lot of destruction. This is what we think might be that Beauvais gauge. It's a very small, delicious, plummy, thick, flavorful, very delicious plum. This tree is a scraggly tree, and we took some cuttings, and then the next year it burned down. And so we did get cuttings of it, and we think it might be sprouting back now. So this is one we're just calling Leland's green plum. It looks a lot like a green gauge, but it's actually not. I think it's a Japanese plum, very sweet, delicious. We find a lot of these Mirabilin plums, these small little circles, but what's amazing is after hundreds of years of crossing and everything, occasionally you find some really outstanding ones. And I really like collecting the best of every color. It's a fun project. And so these are just an array of Myros, or maybe mixed. This orange one might not be a Myro. We just call this Joseph's Coat plum, but it's a scraggler growing in the middle of the woods, and it's the most beautiful plum we've ever seen. We're trying to get it up, but it looks, it's like a natural dwarfing, so we're just watching it. This plum we call very cherry, but it has a very distinct like cherry flavor. It's a plum, but it has a very distinct like artificial almost cherry flavor. And in the sun, those leaves get dark purple. New favorite. We believe this is like a Mirabelle plum just grown out on an old homestead in the middle of the woods. They can be ripe in October, and they're so sweet. And this is just an example of some of these old plums that we're finding. Here's an old purple Myro. Here's an old yellow Myro. This is at Malakoff Diggins again. And this is a over 100-year-old Formosa plum tree. And you can't really talk about plums without introducing Luther Burbank, of course. This is another old plum tree that actually died. But we got cuttings before it actually died. So and it's going to fruit this year for the first time. So we're very excited about that. And this is the Formosa plum. It's one of my new favorite plums, and Burbank was in a legend of his time and is responsible for the base genetics of our plums. And so we still find a lot of his creations scattered about, like the Satsuma, which he imported from Satsuma, Japan. His Santa Rosa, which was one of his favorites and most popular, probably. But Felix Joly also had a lot of prune plums he imported from France, especially, and including that Rose de Sargent with that broken tree. There it is again. It's still alive, actually. It really grew back well. And this is one of his original plates of prune plums that he had. And so once again, this is documents we were able to go in and scan out of his basement. And a lot of his catalogs you can see on our website. We actually have the largest collection of his catalogs. And this is a new plum that we just found, excuse me. And it is the most impressive prune plum we found. It's so large and sweet and delicious. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I don't think Jen does yet. But you can see I actually have big fat hands, and I can only fit 3 of these plums in there. So we propagated some, and we will have some for sale this winter, but we're very excited about this prune plum. Another crop that we find and that Felix Joly was influential in importing were figs. And if you read a few times in there as far as importing different kinds of figs. And then so these are some of them. We think this might be a St. Jean. It's one of the largest fig trees we found down at Bridgeport State Park. Maybe a French paillard. This is Barbara hiding in her fig tree. She's got a few delicious ones. This one is so good. We don't know what this is. We're calling it fat fig for now, but it's quite beautiful and fat and very delicious. I actually did get the cops called on me for picking these. It was in public area, but it was totally worth it. And some missions. We don't know what these are either, but they're very strongly concentrated flavor, almost like strawberry jam, and they're smallish. Another contribution of Felix's was cherries. This is a handwritten list of some of his cherries that he had. And this is what we were able to glean from his catalogs that he supplied. He would often have trees that weren't in his catalogs as well. So it was kind of hard to find out exactly what he had. He had so much. Going out and looking for cherries is always super fun, because you go out in spring when things are just starting to go, or even before, And the cherries and the plums and the almonds, they all start flowering before everything else. So you can always go out and just spot them, identify them, and then maybe even GPS them, and then go back, go back in June or July, and you might have the best cherry of your life. And these are just some of them. The black diamond, this white Tartarian. Amigo must have taken this photo of this tree near Malakoff Diggins, and he thinks it might be the Guigny Marbury cherry. And he took this photo and got these cherries off of it. And then this is kind of what it looks like today. It even looks a little bit more of a mess. But it just goes to show that a lot of these ancient trees are still alive. And this is actually probably the next couple decades, or really the last chance to gather a lot of these genetics before they totally on another old homestead. There's just so many old homestead orchards, it's really even hard to keep track of them. Who needs to go to the store for cherries when you have a cherry tree that does this every year? This is another old cherry tree in Goodyear's Bar. And this was one of our favorites, and it died. This is Emmett's #1 cherry. We did save it, and so we still have it and propagate it. That was a Napoleon Bigaroo, but it totally died. But there's still a few out there, and you can still get that variety. Another one that is almost dead, and we did propagate, and that's the cherries that came off it. It won our best flavor award, the Stage Stop. And then this is another beautiful old cherry tree on another old homestead off of Highway 49. And I really love this photo, and I really love this tree. And actually, he was an amazing guy who passed away a couple years ago. He knew everything about the town. He knew all about the trees. He was a really good steward and an amazing person. And he really cared about these trees. And so I was fortunate to make his friend, and the new owner now is also a very good steward. So that's enjoyable. And this is some flowering. Maybe the Kwansan Sekiyama cherry is something that's grown out here. This one might not be as old. Felix Jolie didn't have this variety, but it's too beautiful. Black diamond cherry. This might have been another Felix Jolie photo. This is an old Gold Rush photo that must have been pulled out of the local libraries. Loaded. And then Felix also introduced tons of roses, a lot of French varieties. And grapes. This is the grape section. He had 241 varieties of grapes in his 1884 catalog. We haven't been able to pinpoint him actually being the first to introduce a major grape, but I would not be surprised if he had also. He was a madman. I can't believe how many plants he had brought over here, including a lot of table raisin wine grapes. This is Randy Oliver of scientificbeekeeping.com, showing off his golden muscat grapes. They do really well here in Grass Valley. Huge clumps, so delicious. This is an old Concord. These branches end up wrapping around like over 100 feet both sides and wrapping around the whole yard. Very impressive plant. This is another wine grape. We don't know what it is, but you can see that trunk is over a foot wide. Some more grapes that we just keep finding. This is a very unique, interesting grape. It's from this old homestead property. It's an old gold bar, about 17 people to sift through the sandbar and get gold out. And so there's still a beautiful orchard out there and lots of plants just surrounding it, including this grape, which are the largest grapes I've seen. And it's what's weird about it. I don't know tons about grapes, but Some are seedless. Some have like slightly aborted seeds. Some have 1, 2, or 3 seeds. Like you never know what you're gonna get. But it is very delicious once they get that dark purple. Perhaps some lady fingers we found. You know, some more grapes. They're just all over the place out here. Lowell Hill grape, we're calling it. Felix did have the Black Corinth in his original catalog. And this is an old picture of it, watercolor. And this is a photo I took maybe 2 years ago of what I think is a Black Corinth seedless grape. It's one of the oldest raisins known. You know, I think it records back 2,000 years. And then apples. Apples are kind of my favorite. I think a lot of people here love apples.
Hey, Adam, would you want to take a couple of questions before you get into the apple section?
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were able to hear me.
Yeah. All right, so we have one from Weston, and he said that he noticed the small trees in your nursery were painted white on the trunks, and he's wondering, is that to prevent sun scald? And can you share some information about the materials you use to do that?
Sure. Well, one of the main causes of apple tree death is sun scald, and you're right about that. And so a lot of people, they either paint with indoor white latex paint, or you can do more natural, like a white clay mixed with water. You can even add cow dung, fresh cow dung, and mix it in, and it actually helps stick to the tree. And so it does help from sunburn. And then once a tree gets sunburned, then it's real easy for a beetle or a bug to get in there and like the apple borer and totally just destroy your tree in a season. And so it's just a preventative, because if you don't do that, they will get your tree if you don't do something.
Yeah. And I was wondering, what are you guys grafting onto? What rootstock are you using out there?
So for the most part, we use M111 like everybody, just because it's a standard semi-dwarf tree that people can pick fruit in their backyard. But we are starting to do more standards. People are really interested in having large 30, 40-foot trees that will live 100 or 200 years. A lot of these semi-dwarves they won't make it that long. And so.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, especially when trying to preserve a lot of these old unique varieties is we need them to survive another 100 years. So a standard rootstock is a good way to do that. We have another question.
And so I know some.
Go ahead.
Well, I just know some people now when they're planting orchards, they'll do standards and they'll space them out real far, and then you'll put dwarfs or semi-dwarfs in between. So that way you can get fruit quicker. And then once those standards grow up and start producing fruit and shading it out, you can actually cut those dwarves out, and then you have a standard orchard in the future.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense for sure. So we have another question. This one's from Stephanie Wells. She's over in Grass Valley. She's wondering about how to get that collecting kit that you had shown. And she has some old heritage pear trees that they'd like to propagate.
Oh, great. Yeah, there's a lot of that in this area. I believe I've met Stephanie. Well, the best way is to email us and at thefgi@gmail.com or adam@felixjolet.org. And then we can send you some of this material.
Excellent. Yeah, every little bit helps for people out there trying to preserve these ones.
Yeah, it's nice. It took us like a lot of these.
Go ahead.
I already lost my train of thought. It's all right.
All right. Well, if anybody else has any questions, please use the Q&A app that's at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do some more questions at the end of Adam's presentation. So now on to apples. Thanks, Adam.
Cool. Well, it was really nice you interjecting there, because I had not being able to see anyone. It's it's like, is this working? Is this all right? So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and we're just going to go through a few more fruit and a few more orchards on this journey. So apples are some of my favorite, like a lot of people here, just their versatility. There's something alluring and something human about them, I believe. We go back, a lot of this stuff is co-created, like I said, with our throughout years and years of our ancestors breeding and selecting, and accidental discoveries, picking the best. And our relationship with apples is totally lost. We go in a store, we get a few varieties that, we know what they're going to sort of taste like. But it's nothing like the living relationship we have with fruit or a fruit tree. Apples were so much more to us than they are now. They were early season, mid-season, late season, storage apples, fresh eating apples, cider apples, pie apples, cooking apples, apples for animals. We had apples all year round, and they all had different functions and uses. And we just lost that, and I think we need to get back to that and really appreciating apples for who they are. And this is a few of his apples. Excuse me. And we did find a few of these out here, which is nice, but we find way more apples than what is here. So a lot of apples were imported elsewhere as well. So this is one of my favorite flavored apples. We believe it's called autumn strawberry, but it's beautiful. Might be a shy bear, but it's a very dense apple with a very amazing, like a raspberry strawberry flavor. It's got a unique fruity floral flavor. We look forward to this every year in October. This is up in our orchard. It's just it just goes to show their personality. Tree in the town of Forest City, and we just call this church apple because, as you can see, these steps here, this was an old church. So it's really fun not knowing names of apples, actually. If you look back, a lot of these fruit, like the Bartlett, was William's Bon Chrétien, or had 100 names and was passed on from family to family to county to country, and people would just rename it because it becomes theirs. It's like their personalized relationship with that fruit. So it's really nice, actually, being able to not know and keeping a local history about it, because that's kind of what we have done over the years. And so, it's really fun, almost redefining our relationships with these heirloom fruits. And this is actually from that tree. I really like how these large brown lenticels kind of reflect the woodpecker damaged tree bark in the background of the same tree. We think this might be a Northwest greening. This is like all stages. That front one there, that's primo deliciousness. That green is a little hard, and that yellow in the background, that's overripe. Perhaps the Christmas pearmain, a very beautiful apple, crunchy late season. This one is an enigma. It is the largest apple we found. That's a quarter is around, and it's growing on a very skinny tree in the woods. It seems like it was planted. It could be a seedling, who knows? We just call it the 20-ounce monarch for now. But it is large, it is crisp, it is very tart, it is early, it is white, and it never browns. Right now they're genetically modifying apples so they don't brown, but a lot of these genetics are already available through traditional breeding. So, this apple could be used for that. And saving these apples isn't always about how they look or what their flavor is, and what you see on the surface. A lot of these apples probably have genetics in there that can be used for breeding or pest resistance or disease resistance. So every apple and every tree is a genetic repository in themselves full of potential that are just totally undiscovered. And there's a whole universe in there that we could be exploring. This might be a limber twig, very delicious apple. This is another unique apple that I really like. It's kind of squarish. It kind of tapers down, knobby stem. The flesh is very dense. It's a good late season. Call it the green keeper for now. It just lasts forever. It's very sweet. It's got a unique flavor and a unique shape as well. This is another unknown apple. It seems to be a shy bearer, but what's really interesting is that it's kind of squarish and it's kind of grayish. It has kind of a grayish screen over it. Oh, flat-headed apple borer. This is why we paint our trees and take good care of them, because this is what happens. This is one of the main pests out here. This little guy is a beetle and lay an egg, and this little flat-headed apple borer will destroy your tree. This might be a transcendent crab, this orange crab apple. That's a quarter next to it. The owner really loves to put a net underneath this to catch all of the apples, and he makes an orange jelly out of it, because there's so much pectin in it, and they're very sweet. This is Jana President taking notes under this amazing apple tree in this Dutch flat orchard. There's about 60 trees there, mostly apples, of course. Apples tend to last the longest, and they keep producing fruit, and you don't have to do anything for them. You just have to get them started, and they just give and they give and they give. And that's the abundance of nature that we're living with. And we should embrace it. And this is an apple from that tree. We're just calling it the Prince for now. Juicy, crunchy, sweet, slightly tart, very aromatic, and fruity flavor. It's another one from this same orchard up in Dutch Flat. Don't know what this is, but it's one of my new favorites. Very crunchy and sweet. This one we call Monarch. This is growing up actually in Malakoff Diggins. It's a pink. It reminds me of a pink lady too, but it's definitely and obviously not a pink lady, but very unique. This is another unique apple. I mean, they have so much character, every single one of them. It's very easy to be allured by apples. For me, it was kind of the gateway fruit, just because you never know what you're going to find, what kind of flavors are inside. But this is one of the earliest apples. This is a July apple. Every apple is large to extra large. There's no mediums or smalls ever on this tree. And they all have this very dense, heavy russeting out of the cavity. And they're very tart, and they kind of sweeten up, throughout July. And by the end, they're kind of much more sweeter, and they get a little softer. We just call this Willow for now until we have a real name. But I came out one day and they had bulldozed that tree because they wanted to put solar panels there. So that broke my heart, but we ended up finding another one not too far away. So we do have this variety. We're just calling it the Willow for now. Also on our journey of apples, we still don't know what this is, but it's definitely one of the more unique apples we've seen. Every single stem is like a puddle of melted stem. It's just like this puddle. And it's a very late season, and that's part of the reason why we never get it, because I think the animals end up getting it every time, and the tree is very small. Rhode Island greening was a Felix's original catalog, and these are the apples that come off it. Another great example of how a tree can make so much food. And, you know, these are some of them, they're very tart, and some people might not like them at first when you eat them, but you cook them and you realize that we're missing something because they're so delicious in the pies. And then this is another heritage orchard that we stumbled upon. And this is only part of it. This is actually 5 acres of apples, mostly apples, planted in 1912 and around 1916. And there's almost 5 acres of apple trees. And what's even more remarkable is that the family kept their names. So on some of these trees, there's actually repurposed soda cans cut open, and the names are carved in them and hanging in the tree. So this was a real gem to see this many trees and so many names. You know, I think there was about at least 15 varieties out here, including this lady apple, which goes way back, you know, at least 2,000 years. This is another amazing apple. I love every apple, so it's really hard for me to pick, but every single one that we come across is amazing to me. This might be an Eder apple. So Albert Eder was in Humboldt, and he was a strawberry and apple breeder. And one of his focuses was red apples. And this is a crab apple. It looks just like a tiny red delicious. But when you crack it open, it's got this red flash, and it's not unpleasant. It's a rather sweet for a crab apple. So this is also on Cox's Bar, where I had mentioned earlier. So this is just Cox's red flash apple for now, but it could be an Eder, and I'd really love to find out which one this is. Another one in that orchard, the King James orchard, is the one with the 5 acres of apples. Found this yellow Newtown pippin. Until I ate one of these, I didn't realize what a super delicious, crisp late season apple was. It's really, I can't believe it fell out of favor. It's so good. And some other things we stumble upon are genetics of different things. You never know what you're going to find. This we think might be a Lamb Abbey apple. But what's interesting is that every termination of the shoot results in some sort of burst of either buds or shoots, and it goes back every single year. So you can go back on the branch, and at every branch you'll see this is 2nd year growth here with the explosion of fruit buds on it. And it actually was the most productive apple in this orchard, and it was growing under a cedar tree. So just something like that, amazing genetics in there. Who knows what can come out of it. There's Seth again at the Fit for the Czar apple tree, another old apple tree. And there it is. There's an old story that the apples in this area, some of them were getting shipped to the Tsar of Russia. And we think it might be this homestead, and it might be these apples. So we thought that was a super fun, localized name for that. Here's a Maiden's Blush apple. It had a label on it, so that was easy. And this is just an example of what apple trees can do. They will totally disappear except for even the tiniest rind of cambium and still be alive. I actually was able to pull a sign off this and get it propagated. And this is another amazing, unique little person here. That yellow one is ripe. That green one is unripe, but the flavor is very intense, and the texture of the flesh is very dense. And I just found this one last year, so we're really looking forward to propagating this one out. And this is kind of one of the hauls, you know, where we go out and just find what we can and lay them all out. It's really fun. So that's kind of the apple section. Pears are a whole other, so much variability. It's really hard for me to figure out what some of these are. Jen's much better at it for sure. this is just like a beautiful little array of some of the pears. We got a Comise here, the Beret Clairgeau, Winter Nellis, Autumn Bartlett, Beret Bosque, a couple seedlings. And this is the Cox's Bar Orchard, and there's lots of pears here. There's a lot of D'Anjous and Bartletts. Bosque. We think this is a sugar pear, just melting, juicy pear. We call this one the sweet gem for now, but every single pear has this russet patch, so it seems like it should be able to be identifiable. This is one of my new favorite pears. I've never seen anything like it, and I call it the potato pear. It looks like these potatoes hanging in this tree. This is another old Gold Rush homestead. It was actually a dairy, the Berryman Ranch, and there's still lots of plants on there. A lot of pears, hops, flowering plants. But this tree actually looked like an oak tree. I walked right by it thinking it was an oak tree until the owner told me to take a second look at it. And then I went back, I was like, holy moly. And then you look up and there's these like potatoes hanging in the pear. But you can tell I bit that. And right off the tree, it was just super melting, juicy, flavorful. And these nice fat stems. So Yali, Asian pear that we found. A Comise pear. That looks like a D'Anjou. This is another unique one that may be a seedling. We call it the Colfax russet. But there's these small, delectable, juicy, flavorful pears, very dense flavored, almost like a seckle, but maybe not quite as amazing as a seckle. And what's cool, like this one, it grows right out of the branch. I thought that was very cool. It's very unique growth. I hadn't seen that. This might be a honey sweet. It's a later one, but it's like a large seckle. It's so good. And this is another pear orchard in Dutch Flat with some of our favorite people. They have 100 Bartlett pears planted 100 years ago, and they're still producing with very little work. And so that's the kind of food supply we should have. And here is a Kiefer pear. It's an 1860s Philadelphia pear. I feel like this kind one, it is the most vigorous, the most healthy, the most productive pear I've ever come across. There's 4 trees that I know, and they produce every year, and every pear is large, and every year it makes a huge bumper crop. So as far as permaculture plants go, I'm not sure you can beat this one. Gillet had his hand in a little bit of everything, as you can tell, including almonds. He had a nice list of almonds, including what we think might be this princess almond tree with a very impressive bloom. Not sure what almond tree this is, but a very good one and photogenic. Nevada City almonds, they're just scattered throughout the whole gold country. I love this tall almond tree because someone decided to fill it in with cement, and it's still alive. I've even seen another tree where someone just sprayed spray foam in there too. I don't know if it helps or not. This is most likely the IXL almond, which is a California almond, and it's sister to the nonpareil that everyone eats. A.T. Hatch planted a bunch of almonds in California, and the nonpareil came out of it, and this IXL came out. They were considered equally amazing at the time, but the nonpareil ended up beating her out. They're very flat. If you look at the almonds, it's a unique flat shape. And that's actually the tree. It's growing right off the road, right off the side of the road. You would have never guessed it. And you just have to be a fruit person who just stops at every single fruit tree in order to find these things. Some more almonds. This is a new impressive almond. This is actually at about 3,500 feet. It's very cold and snowy. One of the largest almond trees I've seen. And this is the nut that came off of it. It was huge, like the nuts inside that husk, obviously. But we did just replant it, and it turns out it's one of the most vigorous almond trees we've ever seen. and fruited its second year in the pot. Like right now it's in a 15-gallon pot and it's got maybe 30 almonds on it, which, you know, it's hard to get an almond to almond where we are because of the frost. And he also had his hand in peaches, and there's still, even though they don't last as long, there's still a few hanging on around here, including this fellow. This came off the same tree, and don't know what it is. Don't know any of the peaches. This is another old peach. It doesn't look like much, but it's an oldie and makes these very unique peaches. They're like plummy and gummy, thick, textured peach, blood peach. An Indian blood peach, which are, you can still get around. They're not as common. I thought this was a racist term, but from what I understand, actually, it was the first round of people that came from Europe. They came up the East Coast and they planted these, and they gave the indigenous population a bunch of these seeds. And then maybe a couple hundred years after that, a new wave came through the country, and we're amazed to find that these blood peaches of the vine were growing out here. And then at that point, people were saying, no, we've always had these. These are our peaches. And so they're like, oh, that's interesting. Well, they must be the Indians' blood peach. So from what I understand, that's how that story happened. But this is actually one of our favorite peaches, and it doesn't get leaf curl. So I feel like some good breeding could happen there. This is a green peach. We call it green moonshine. Very good green peach. This is a Sicilian golden nectarine. You know, it just goes to show the amount of fruit that have traveled to California from all over the world. The gentleman who called me about this tree, his father actually had brought it from Sicily, and it's growing in his backyard. Everyone should have one of these in their backyard. The thing is you can't pick them early, and they don't store. So right when they're ripe on the tree is when you have to eat it. Like, and it's the best. But you can't pick it early. You can't store it. You just have to go out there, squeeze a bunch, and find a soft one. And roses, of course, French roses beautified this landscape quite a bit during the gold rush. And hand in that as well. He had at least 52. After Felix Gillet had passed away in 1908, another gentleman, Parsons, took over and ran it into 1969. And at that time, it was considered one of, if not the oldest nursery, continuous nursery operating, you know, in competition with John Rock there. I think he had a longer nursery, but he had moved from maybe Niles to Fremont. But either way, it was just it ran a very long time. Parsons had offered this rose, and this is one of my favorite roses. It's actually a California rose, and it was bred here. But he did offer this rose in his catalog, and we love rose rustling, especially when there's not as much fruit happening at the spring, in the summer when all of these flowers are going off. So it's really fun to go around and look for roses. I love the Fortune's double yellow. This climber will take over an entire hillside. A Williams double yellow. It's a scrubby rose. You can see its growth pattern here, where it just kind of grows in these droughty, like terrible soil. Like you could put this on just clay and decomposed granite and it will grow. And there's Rowan White of Seed Savers Exchange and Sierra Seeds helping me go. Don't know what this one is. It could be an alba, but most of the flowers, they don't fully open. They make this kind of white egg in the middle and then fall off and just kind of fluff out. But this is kind of like its prime, when it looks the most beautiful, when it's flayed out like that and it has an egg in the middle. Don't know, but it's very cool. Dr. Van Fleet rose. This is like a permaculture rose. I mean, this thing will take over the scene, and it's very disease and pest resistant. Like all of these leaves are like just glossy green and very little black spot or pest damage. Every year it looks this way. So I really like this rose. This is the Cherokee rose. It's considered invasive in the Southeast where it's very humid. But it's, from what I understand, it's really named that way. It's not indigenous to the Cherokee Nation or the United States. I think it's Laotian or somewhere over there. But it got brought here and it spread like wildfire. And they call it the Cherokee rose because Andrew Jackson, he kicked out a lot of the indigenous population, which created the Trail of Tears. And so when they had to leave their lands, that whole area has lots of these roses. And so the white petals would fall, and they would say it was like the tears of the Cherokee Nation, as a result of the colonial expansion of the United States government. Which goes to show like that's kind of what happened in California too. A lot of this is a colonial, and a lot of this beauty was at the expense of the indigenous population, unfortunately. This is the main rose Bible. Greg Lowry, Vintage Roses. They have a nonprofit now, but they've got one of the largest rose collections in the world. Very awesome people, and they've helped us identify quite a few roses, and they even have many of Felix's original roses. So we are trying to get those and reestablish a rose garden. We are nearing towards the end here, but Gillet's mulberries spanned quite a bit. And he was even a proponent of growing silkworms, which didn't actually work out. But he was all over the place. He is credited with introducing the Noir de España mulberry into California, which some argue is the best mulberry. It's so amazing. And you found it when, oh wait, this is his original line drawing from his catalog. And you found it when your hand looks like that. And your face is pink. And it's very strong, juicy, very tart, very dense flavors. It's like an overpowering of everything. Too sweet, too tart, too flavorful. It kind of blows your mind. This is another one. It's a lavenderish mulberry we found. Very good. Some white mulberries. Yeah, and he wrote a treatise on silkworms and eggs and raising them. And he just tried to fill in every single possible niche that he saw available out here, bringing in all the old world economics and agriculture into California. Some of his silkworms. And he was also instrumental in the strawberries. He had, I think, 52 types of strawberries, maybe 34 here. Maybe more. And it's a pretty good chance that some of these genetics contributed to Etter's strawberry projects. But he was a prolific writer and breeder of strawberries. But besides all these main crops, there was tons of other random things. He had 64 kinds of gooseberries, locust. He even had pawpaws, sorbus, just anything that would grow here and be useful. Even persimmons. We still find a few persimmons, not too many. We really like this persimmon. It's like a fuyu, but different. We think it's a shiro. This is also on the Berryman Ranch. This is like a 25-foot persimmon tree. That's me going up there to get some scions and some fruit. You can see how tall it is. And this is the fruit that came out of there. Could be Tenashi, but don't know. This is a very beautiful and astringent, terrible tasting persimmon, but I don't know what to do with it. This persimmon is either. It's like a fuyu, but it's not good crunchy. It's like a haichia type. Looks like a fuyu. Some randoms. The thing about persimmons, they confuse me. They have astringent and non-astringent, and the seeds make a difference. And more. And this is what happens when hachias get pruned and watered well. Giant hachias. We'll go down to Oto Orchard and get Hoshigaki dried persimmons down there. And we find lots of hops scattered about. What's interesting about hops is that during Prohibition, there was tons of beer making out here. In fact, there's tons of illegal stills out here. What had happened is the police had bulldozed the hops fields. But then what they did is they just piled them up in dirt, as the story goes. And everyone around there just grabbed all the rhizomes and then just planted them in random creeks and around the house in places where the law couldn't get to them. So here in the middle of the woods next to this creek is about 1/4 to 1/3 of an acre of hops. This is all hops covering the ground. And you can see some of the bottoms of these trees are just strangled by the decades of hops vines piling up. A cool one is an underappreciated fruit, the quince. This tall one over here might be the Portugal, which is. This is Kenny and Kenny's quinces. It's probably a pineapple quince, which is also a Burbank introduction. But he had recently passed away too, but he was a great steward of all these trees, and we'll miss Kenny a lot. And we'll find olives. We have one of the largest old cranberry bogs out here, like acres of cranberries planted after all the hydraulic mining was made illegal. So they planted some cranberries down there where they were washing a lot of the gold away, and they're still around. That's Thanksgiving. We find some pomegranates, which we're getting into now and propagating some rare pomegranates. This white one is very sweet. It actually has like maybe 0 tart, which some people might not be looking for that because you kind of want a tart sometimes, but it's very delicious and there's good uses for it. Another pomegranate on an old 1800s ranch. Look, we even found a couple pistachios. This is the female pistachio. There's actually 2 males over there too. And this is our super volunteer, Zeke, who goes out with me a lot. And we found this pistachio tree. And these are the pistachios that came off that tree. Barb, and here's a eastern horse chestnut on the Delay property. Weeping redwood, shagbark hickory. There's the nut. And this is my buddy Mark Fowler, fruit adventurer, looking at this amazing myrtle communis. One of my new favorite plants, a Mediterranean herbal plant mentioned in the Bible. This tree has an enormous trunk. And then goes up about 7 feet and then just showers down branches. So it creates this like room inside that you can gather very aromatic and beautiful flowers. And old hollies. So as you can see, Felix had his hand in just about everything. And he started a lot of these horticultural industries in California, in Oregon, and Washington, as far as apples. Hazelnuts, walnuts, chestnuts, prune plums, strawberries. And so this is some of his publications. He was an active in politics. He was active in his community. He was part of the original board that became the California Food and Drug Administration. He just did so much. He was a powerhouse for sure. And so, yeah, and just to recap some of Felix Joly's legacies is how many varieties he had introduced, many earlier than many other people in some cases. And he did helped create and establish a lot of these agricultural industries. And he was really active in writing in like the Pacific Rural Press and the Mountain Messenger, all these different agricultural publications where people would ask questions and then other farmers would respond and answer questions. It's kind of like the Facebook of 1900. And so we really think that he was a forefather of perennial agriculture in the West Coast. And so part of our job is just kind of preserving this and documenting his legacy and preserving as many amazing plants, fruiting, flowering, that we can find before they die. And so that is the general presentation. You can contact us at the FGI at Gmail. This is our office number. And this is our website where we have lots of information on Felix Gillet, on our institute. You can look at a lot of the pictures, a lot of fruit that we'll be offering. And yeah, thanks for listening to this presentation for sure.
Awesome. That was really cool, Adam. You guys are doing a lot of neat stuff down there, and man, some of those varieties are really amazing. I was thinking, being up in Idaho here, I might have to see if I could get one of those potato pears, so we can fool people and tell them that we grow our potatoes in trees up here. So we have a few questions.
Yeah, last year I had 4 trees. A couple scions, but then this year, every year we're able to get a little more scions in order to produce more. So we should have a lot more in the near future.
Heck yeah, I'll be reaching out for one of those. We have a few more questions from our audience. Nancy Webb is wondering, what is the time span in your area for is it pre-1880s or from 1880 on? What are you looking at out there?
Yeah, so we are in gold country. So as soon as the gold started coming in, people started coming in. Were other homesteads in there in the 1850s, 1840s, really happened with the influx of people looking for gold.
Cool. We had a question from Don Ricks. He's noticing that you're visiting a lot of these homesteads in very remote areas, and he's wondering if the fruit in these remote areas, if you're seeing a lot of insect damage on them.
Yeah, that's a whole area of study. So some show insect damage and then some don't. And sometimes a couple trees will be hammered by a codling moth and one right in the middle doesn't get it. So I think the isolation has been a positive, not being like, not as much disease or pests just coming in there and spreading and wreaking havoc. So I think that's been a real positive aspect of trying to find these things. But the flip side to that too is that maybe some of these don't have disease or pest issues because it's so isolated. So I think part of the research here is what we're doing. We created a mother orchard where we planted some of our favorites back at the farm. And we're going to just do observations with fresh trees now and amongst a population of many other trees. So we'll be able to get a lot more good information. But part of this is what we're gleaning is the possibility that some of these genetics are resistant to some of the more debilitating diseases or pests in our agricultural industries.
Yeah, definitely valuable for breeding projects in the future. We have Keith Park is asking, what do you use an app or what type of technology do you use to GIS and locate trees?
Yeah, you know what? I just generally use very accessible apps on the phone. You can actually use Google Maps and drop pins, which are pretty accurate. There's another app called Motion X GPS, which I use. You can kind of go out a way where there's no reception and still acquire GPS points and take pictures and leave trails too for where you're going. So I've used those two a lot in order to map out some of these orchards.
Excellent. We have a question from Maddie. He's wondering what's up with this shagbark hickory. Have you ever propagated one of those?
Hey, Maddie. I think I know Maddie. There's a couple shagbark hickeys around. And that one actually I showed you is on Felix Joy's property. So we did get some nuts and we started just doing it from seed, but we haven't really propagated that out yet.
More work to be done.
Always.
Another question from Nancy Webb, or I guess more of a comment. She said her great uncle brought avocados to California and helped establish Calavos, and he never cashed in, but he was a visionary like the people that you've been teaching us about. So she wanted to thank you for sharing all this information about the history and the legacy.
That's awesome. I think there's a lot of unsung heroes that we'll never hear about. All the different stories and introductions that people brought in. It's hard to say too, because a lot of people came in on their own, and wherever they came from, they brought something. They weren't going to just travel, weeks and weeks and months to get to some place and not have some of their favorite food or some of their favorite seeds of trying to cash in on the mining economy there.
We got a question from Cassie Olgren. She is, let's see, have you found any or collected any varieties that are at higher elevations? She's at around 7,000 feet, and she's in a high and dry location in Colorado, and wondering if you found any that you think would be good fit for her.
Yeah, maybe not quite as high as 7,000, but we do, the higher we go, I'd say apples, pears are most versatile and capable of surviving that kind of elevation. But we do find mostly, I would say, apples. I would try to go with some high elevation apples. I think we have some from like 4,000 and 5,000 feet.
Cool. Yeah, she's gonna find something for a little higher elevation even.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a last question from Jerry Dangle from UC Davis, and he's mentioned that early seminars that we had in this series addressed the DNA-based variety identification for apples. And today you mentioned the naming and renaming of some varieties as a natural part of people interacting and finding these fruits on their own. Do you think there's a confounding aspect to renaming these varieties, or is it confusing efforts to find the real name of some of these varieties?
Yeah, of course. There's a flip side to that as well. On our website, and when we present, we try to be clear about the historical name and then also what we are naming them. We don't want to name something like A24 DF7. It's not personal. So there is something about getting the historical name, but also it's, like I said, like with historical names, like the Bartlett has 100 names. The one that stuck was Mr. Bartlett, who planted them out here. But for 1,500 years, it was called something else. So I think maybe obviously for the fact of research and documentation, it really is important to at least delineate when you know something or when you don't know something, or if you've renamed it. But, just being like out here in the community and, it's like, I think it's a natural thing to go, this is size apple, and just to continue the local legacies. I think it's very, poetic and community oriented.
For sure, and especially when you have apples like the one at the church that was right at the church steps, you're not going to get much of a better name for it than that.
Yeah,
or
the names make themselves.
Yeah, or I like the fit for a czar. That's a pretty interesting one.
I'm pretty sure that was an amigo there.
Heck yeah. Yep. And we do have one more comment, and this is probably more for Cassie, who was wondering about high elevations. But Jen K says that plums do well in high elevation, especially the gauge type. And she is on the east side of the sea areas and must be at elevation.
That is a good point. Actually, we do have a green gauge, and that is the highest elevation plum that we have found. I think there was a Coast Golden Drop also. Yeah, I would say that she's right about that.
Excellent. Well, I think that wraps it up for our sharing here. And that wraps it up for our whole conference here, which is it's exciting, but it's also a little sad that this is our last one. But I wanted to thank everybody for attending this conference and participating. It's great to have the interaction and all the questions coming in and everything. I also wanted to send a thank you to the whole planning committee who's put together this Heritage Orchard Conference. We're going to be getting together here next month to start plotting our next steps. So I'm sure everybody that's been signed up is going to get looped into our future plans here. I wanted to give a special thanks to Katrina Mendre at Montana State University and Richard Ullman of the Lost Apple Project. Those two have been instrumental in helping getting all this set up and arranged. So yeah, it's been a great conference. So you haven't heard the last from us. So stay tuned for future plans, and we'll all get together again soon.
Thank you so much for setting this up. It was great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for presenting for us, Adam, and we'll all be talking to you soon. All right, take care, everyone. Thank you.